To his friend Cornelius Ursus 103. Julius Bassus, a man struggling and celebrated in university, has in recent days been standing trial. In Vespasian's time, he was indicted by two private citizens. After being referred to the Senate, his case lay for a long time in abeyance, but he was finally acquitted and discharged. As a friend of Domitian, he felt endangered under Titus and was then relegated by Domitian. After being recalled by Nerva, he obtained the province of Bithynia and was indicted on his return. The accusation against him was a vehement, as his defense was conscientious. The voting was divided, but the majority inclined to mercy. Pomponius Rufus was the prosecutor, a radiant forceful speaker, and Theophanes, one of the Bithynian ambassadors, the fireman and originator of the indictment, was his second string. I spoke for the other side, for Bassus had imposed on me on the task of laying the foundation of the entire defense. I was to speak of his positive qualities, which were many, arising from the fame of his lineage, and from the hazardous processes he had undergone. I was to speak of the plotting of the informers which they were seeking to exploit for gain. I was to speak of the reasons why he had alienated all the most turbulent agitators, such as Theophanes himself. Bassus had wanted me to confront the most serious charge hanging over him, for two the other accusations sounded more serious. He was on those counts deserving not merely of acquittal but also of praise. What weighed heavily on this naive and unthinking person was that he had received as a friend certain presents from provincials, for he had been quaestor in that same province. His accusers labeled these thefts and plunder, while he called them gifts. But the law forbids the acceptance even of gifts. On this issue, what was I to do? What line should I take in his defense? Was I to deny the accusation? I feared that to admit it would be seen as acknowledging blatant theft. In addition, denial of a clean act will aggravate the charge rather than diminish it, especially as the defendant himself had not left his lawyers with carte blanche, for he had told many people, including the emperor himself, that the only small gifts he had received were on his birthday and at the Saturnalia, when he had himself sent presents to several persons. So was I to plead for pardon. I would have cut the defendant's throat if I had admitted that his guilt was so clear-cut that pardon alone could save it. Was I to defend his action as above board? That would have been no help to him, but would have exposed me as barefaced. Confronted with the problem, I decided to hold a middle course, and I think that I succeeded. My speech, as happens with battles too, was interrupted by nightfall. I had spoken for 3.5 hours, with an hour and a half still available, for though the law I had permitted an accuser 6 hours and a defendant 9. The defendant had divided the time between myself and my seconder, so that I was to speak for 5 hours, and he was to take up the rest. The success of my speech consoled me to opt for silence and to say no more, for it is rash not to be content with what has gone well. Moreover, I fear that my physical strength would fail me if I again shouldered the burden, for it is more difficult to resume a speech than to continue with one. There was the further danger that the rest of my speech, when abandoned, would induce a cold response, and when resumed will cause weariness. Take the parallel of a torch. It keeps its flame alive when continually shaken, but once put down, it becomes very difficult to restore. The same way the heat of a speaker and the concentration of a listener are maintained when unbroken. but weakened if there is an intermission and relaxation. But Buzz implored me with repeated pleas, even almost to the point of tears, that I should take up my allotted time. So I compiled and put his interest before my own. It worked out well. I found that Senate's attention as lively and as fresh as if they had been lost rather than neglected by my previous speech. Lucius Albinus took over from me so appropriately that our speeches are thought to have contained the variation of two orations, but the coherence of one. Herennius Polius made a forceful and dignified reply, and Theophanes again followed. He delivered this speech, like the others, with utter shamelessness, for though he was following after two speakers, who were both ex-consuls and eloquent orators, he claimed his time somewhat too generously. He spoke until darkness fell, and even as night drew on, for lamps were brought in. Next day Romulus and Fronto spoke wonderfully well on behalf of Bassus, and the evidence of witnesses took up a full day. Babius Macer, the consul designate, proposed that Bassus should be committed under the law of extortion, and Caepio Hispo, that assessors should be appointed with Bassus' laws of status. Both proposals were justified. How can that be? You ask, when the proposals were so different. The answer is that Macer, following the law, regarded it as appropriate to condemn one who had illegally accepted gifts, while Caepio, since he believed that the Senate had the power, as in fact it has, both to soften and to intensity the rigor of the law, had some justification in proposing pardon of an action which was admittedly forbidden, but was not without precedent. Caepio's revealed, indeed, on rising to make his proposal, he was greeted with the applause usually accorded to speakers when they resumed their seats. From this you can gather how warm-hearted was the reception given to his words, since there was such support when he seemed about to speak. However, in the community at large as in the Senate, people's views were divided. Those who favored Caepio's proposal censured that of Macer as unbending and harsh, while those who agreed with Macer called the alternative proposal wishy-washy and also illogical, the argument being that it is unfitting for a man to remain a senator if assessors have been nominated to deal with him. There was also a third proposal. Valerius Paulinus, agreeing with Caepio, further recommended that once Theophanes had reported on his embassy, he should be investigated, for it was claimed that in the course of the prosecution many of his actions made him liable under the very same law as that under which he had indicted Bassus. But the consuls did not pursue this proposal, in spite of the fact that it gained remarkable support from most of the Senate. However, Paulinus gained a reputation for fair dealing and integrity. When the Senate was discharged, Bassus was welcomed by a huge crowd of people, making a great din and demonstrating great joy. The renewal of the long-standing saga of the dangers he had undergone had brought him popularity, as did his name, widely known for the hazards he had been dealt, and the unhappy and unsightly appearance of his age and lofty frame. This letter will be for you an affront horror, for you are to await the full and substantial speech which follows. Your wait will be lengthy, for revision of such an important case cannot be undertaken lightly and speedily. Farewell.